Emma nervously fixed her hair in the rearview mirror before stepping out of her car. The large suburban house before her was decorated with colorful balloons and a happy 50th birthday banner that fluttered in the gentle summer breeze. It had been almost 2 years since she had last visited her hometown, and the thought of seeing everyone again made her stomach twist with anxiety. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, grabbing the carefully wrapped gift from the passenger seat. "It's just family." As Emma walked up the stone path, the front door swung open. Her Aunt Sarah stood there, looking as elegant as ever in a flowing blue dress. "Emma, you made it." Sarah rushed forward, pulling her niece into a warm hug. "I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind. And miss your big day?" "Never," Emma replied, breathing in the familiar scent of her aunt's perfume. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "You're here now, that's what matters. Come in, everyone's out back." Emma followed her aunt through the house, noticing the small changes since her last visit. New paintings hung on the walls, and the furniture had been rearranged. The sound of laughter and conversation grew louder as they approached the backyard. "Look who finally arrived," Sarah announced as they stepped onto the patio. A chorus of greetings erupted from the gathered family members. Emma smiled, waving awkwardly as she scanned the crowd. Her eyes landed on Daniel, her aunt's husband, who was manning the grill. He looked up, catching her gaze, and his face broke into a warm smile that made something flutter in her chest. "There's my favorite niece-in-law," Daniel called out, handing the grilling tongs to Emma's cousin before making his way over. He wrapped her in a brief hug that somehow felt different from all the others she'd received. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding us." Emma laughed, trying to ignore the strange tension she felt. "Just busy with work. The magazine keeps me running around like crazy." For the next few hours, Emma mingled with relatives, catching up on family gossip and avoiding questions about her love life. She had almost relaxed when she felt a hand on her elbow. "Mind if I steal you for a minute?" Daniel asked quietly. "I could use help grabbing more ice from the garage freezer." Emma nodded, following him through the kitchen and into the attached garage. The door closed behind them, muffling the party sounds and creating a strange bubble of silence. Daniel didn't move toward the freezer. Instead, he leaned against the workbench, his eyes serious. "It's good to see you, Emma, really good." "You too," she replied, suddenly aware of how alone they were. "Everything okay?" Daniel ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, a gesture Emma had always found endearing. "I've been wanting to talk to you about something important." Emma's heart raced. "Sounds serious." "It is." Daniel took a deep breath. "What I'm about to tell you might shock you, but I need you to hear me out completely before you respond." Emma nodded slowly, her mouth suddenly dry. "Sarah and we've been in an open marriage for the past 5 years." Emma blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "It was Sarah's idea, actually," Daniel continued. "We loved each other deeply, but we both realized we needed something different, something more." Emma struggled to process this information. Her aunt and uncle had always seemed like the perfect couple, the gold standard she measured relationships against. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel took a step closer. "Because Sarah is leaving for Europe next week. That 3-month sabbatical she mentioned, it's something we planned together. While she's gone," he paused, seeming to gather his courage. "While she's gone, I was hoping you might consider spending time with me." Emma stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "Spending time." "I've always felt a connection with you, Emma. Something special. Sarah knows this. She's known for years, and she's given her blessing." The world seemed to tilt under Emma's feet. "You're asking me to be with you? While my aunt is away." Daniel nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it's a lot to take in. You don't need to answer now. Think about it." Emma backed away until she hit the freezer behind her. "I should get back to the party." "Emma, please." "I need some air," she said, turning quickly and pushing through the door back into the kitchen. As she rejoined the celebration, Emma's mind raced. The shock of Daniel's confession was overwhelming, but what disturbed her most was the realization that somewhere deep inside, a part of her had been waiting years to hear those words. Emma couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her old childhood bed, her mind replaying Daniel's words over and over. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 3:17 am when she finally gave up and sat up, pushing her tangled hair away from her face. Her small overnight bag sat in the corner of the guest room. She had planned to stay the whole weekend for Sarah's birthday celebration, but now the thought of facing Daniel across the breakfast table made her stomach tight with anxiety. Emma slipped out of bed and quietly packed her things. She scribbled a quick note explaining that an emergency at work required her immediate return to the city. It wasn't entirely a lie. She did have a deadline looming for her magazine article, but it wasn't due for another week. By 4:30 am, Emma was on the highway back to her apartment in the city, the roads empty except for occasional trucks. The rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange as her thoughts drifted back to Daniel. She had always felt something special for him, a connection that went beyond what was appropriate for an uncle-in-law. His kind eyes, the way he listened when she spoke as if every word mattered, how he remembered small details about her life that even her parents forgot. For years she had pushed these feelings deep down, convinced they were one-sided and improper. But now, knowing he felt the same way, and that Sarah knew and approved, it changed everything, yet solved nothing. Emma arrived at her apartment building just after 7 am. The elevator ride to her floor seemed to take forever, her body suddenly aware of how tired she was. Inside her apartment, she dropped her bag by the door and collapsed onto her couch, pulling out her phone to call the one person who might help her make sense of this situation. Olivia answered on the fourth ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "This better be important. It's Sunday morning, Em. Daniel asked me to be with him while Sarah is in Europe," Emma blurted out. There was a long silence on the other end. "I'm going to need coffee for this conversation. Give me 5 minutes." Emma paced her small living room while waiting for Olivia to call back. When her phone finally rang, she answered immediately. "Okay, start from the beginning," Olivia said. Emma explained everything: the party, the private conversation in the garage, the revelation about their open marriage, and Daniel's shocking request. "Wow," Olivia said when Emma finished. "That's a lot to process. How do you feel about it?" "Confused, flattered, guilty," Emma sighed. "And if I'm being honest, a little excited." "Have you ever thought about him that way before?" Emma hesitated. "Yes, for years. But I always felt terrible about it." "And you're sure Sarah knows and is okay with this?" "That's what Daniel said. But I didn't get a chance to talk to her directly." "That would be my first requirement," Olivia said firmly. "You need to hear it from Sarah herself before you even consider this." Emma nodded, though Olivia couldn't see her. "You're right." Just then, Emma's phone beeped with an incoming text. Her heart jumped when she saw Daniel's name on the screen. "It's him," she told Olivia. "Daniel just texted me." "Read it," Olivia urged. Emma opened the message. "I'm sorry if I upset you yesterday. Sarah noticed you left early. I told her about our conversation. She wants to call you when she has a moment alone. Please don't ignore us. Whatever you decide, we both care about you deeply." Emma read the message to Olivia. "Well, that answers one question," Olivia said. "Sarah definitely knows. But this is still complicated, Em. We're talking about your family." "I know." Emma stared out her window at the city skyline. "What would you do?" "I can't answer that. But I think you need to talk to Sarah before making any decisions." After hanging up with Olivia, Emma took a long shower, trying to clear her head. As she was drying her hair, her phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. Emma's hand shook as she answered. "Hello." "Emma, sweetheart." Sarah's warm voice came through the speaker. "Daniel told me you left early. Is everything okay?" "Hi, I had some work to finish," Emma lied. "He also told me about your conversation in the garage." Emma's throat tightened. "Sarah, I would never." "Listen to me," Sarah interrupted gently. "What Daniel and I have is special. We love each other deeply, but we've both always known that love isn't something that diminishes when shared. It grows." "I don't understand," Emma whispered. "I've seen the way you look at him," Sarah continued, "and the way he lights up when you're around. I've known about this connection between you two for years." Emma closed her eyes, embarrassment washing over her. "I never meant to." A week passed without Emma contacting either Sarah or Daniel. She threw herself into her work at the magazine, staying late at the office, and bringing assignments home on the weekend. But no matter how busy she kept herself, Her thoughts constantly returned to Daniel's proposition and Sarah's surprising approval. On Friday evening, Emma was curled up on her couch with a glass of wine and her laptop, pretending to edit an article while actually staring blankly at the screen. The sudden ring of her doorbell made her jump, spilling wine on her shirt. "Just a minute," she called out, dabbing at the stain as she walked to the door. She looked through the peephole and froze. Daniel was standing in her hallway, his hands in his pockets, looking nervous. Emma's heart pounded as she opened the door. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" He gave her a small smile. "I was in the city for a meeting. I thought maybe we could talk in person." He held up a paper bag. "I brought dinner, but I can leave if you want." Emma hesitated, then stepped back. "Come in." Daniel walked into her apartment, looking around with interest. "Nice place. Very you." "Thanks." Emma took the bag from him and peeked inside. "Thai food? Your favorite, if I remember correctly. Pad Thai, extra spicy." She smiled despite herself. "You remembered." Emma busied herself getting plates and silverware, trying to calm her racing heart. "Sarah left for Europe yesterday, right?" Daniel nodded, taking off his jacket and draping it over a chair. "Yes, she called me from London this morning, said the flight was good." They sat at Emma's small dining table, the food between them creating a buffer zone. For a few minutes they ate in awkward silence. Finally, Daniel put down his fork. "I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have sprung all that on you at the party." Emma looked up at him. It was a lot to take in. "I know. And Sarah gave me an earful about my timing." He smiled ruefully. "But she also told me about your conversation." Emma pushed her food around her plate. "She surprised me. I never expected her to be so understanding." "That's Sarah, always full of surprises." Daniel's eyes softened. "It took us years to get where we are, to build this level of trust and honesty." "I still don't fully understand it," Emma admitted. "How can she be okay with this?" Daniel leaned forward. "Because she loves me enough to want me to be happy, and because she loves you too, and wants the same for you." Emma met his gaze. "And what about you? What do you want, Daniel?" "I want to spend time with you, get to know you as more than just my wife's niece." He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of touching hers. "I've felt this connection between us for years, Emma, and I've always respected the boundaries of our family relationship. But now, with Sarah's blessing, I'm wondering if we could explore this connection. See where it leads." Emma looked at his hand so close to hers. It would be so easy to bridge that small gap. And what happens when Sarah comes back? When the 3 months are over? That depends on us. On what we discover about each other. On how we feel. His voice dropped lower. "Sarah and I have discussed possibilities, but there's no pressure, no expectations. If this doesn't work between us, we all go back to how things were, no hard feelings." Emma took a deep breath and slowly slid her hand forward until her fingers touched his. The contact sent a warm tingle up her arm. "I'm scared, Daniel. This could get messy." He gently wrapped his fingers around hers. "It could. Or it could be beautiful." They sat like that for a long moment, hands connected across the table, food forgotten. Daniel's thumb traced small circles on her skin, each movement sending little sparks of pleasure through her body. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow night?" he asked softly. "A proper date. We can take things slow, see how we feel." Emma looked at their joined hands, then up at Daniel's hopeful face. She thought about Sarah's words. "Don't let fear of what others might think stop you from following your heart." "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that." Daniel's smile lit up his entire face. "I'll pick you up at 7. As Emma nodded, Daniel stood up and walked around the table. He gently pulled her to her feet and looked into her eyes, his hands lightly holding hers. "May I?" he whispered. Emma nodded again, her heart pounding as Daniel leaned down slowly. His lips brushed against hers, so soft and gentle it was barely a kiss at all. Then he stepped back, still holding her hands. "Until tomorrow," he said. After Daniel left, Emma touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. For the first time in a week, the confusion in her mind gave way to a quiet certainty. Whatever happened next, she knew she had to explore this unexpected path. Emma spent all day Saturday getting ready for her date with Daniel. She tried on and discarded outfit after outfit, finally settling on a simple blue dress that Sarah had once complimented her on. The irony wasn't lost on her. At exactly 7 o'clock, her doorbell rang. Emma took a deep breath and opened the door to find Daniel standing there in a dark suit, holding a bouquet of lilies. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said softly. Emma blushed. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Daniel handed her the flowers. "I remembered you mentioned once that lilies were your favorite. You have a good memory." Emma took the flowers and invited him in while she put them in water. When she returned from the kitchen, she found Daniel looking at the framed photos on her bookshelf. He was holding one that showed Emma, Sarah, and himself at a family picnic 3 summers ago. "I remember this day," he said. "You and Sarah ganged up on me during the water balloon fight." Emma laughed. "You deserved it after dunking us both in the lake." Daniel placed the photo back carefully, ready to go. The restaurant Daniel had chosen was small and intimate, tucked away on a quiet street. The hostess led them to a corner table, partially hidden by a decorative screen that gave them privacy. "This place is lovely," Emma said, looking around at the warm lighting and elegant decor. "I thought you might like it. The chef trained in Paris." They'd ordered wine, and as they waited for their food, the initial awkwardness between them slowly melted away. Daniel asked about her work at the magazine, and Emma found herself telling him about her dreams of becoming a senior editor someday. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. "You've always been so supportive of my writing," Emma said, "even back when I was in college, sending those terrible short stories to everyone in the family." Daniel smiled. "They weren't terrible. I still remember that one about the lighthouse keeper. It was quite moving." Emma stared at him. "You actually read them?" "Of course I did. I read everything you write." His eyes held hers. "I've always been interested in your passions, Emma. That hasn't changed." Their food arrived, momentarily breaking the intensity of the moment. As they ate, their conversation shifted to Daniel's work as an architect. "I'm designing a community center downtown," he told her. "The kind of place I wish I had access to when I was growing up." Emma loved watching his face light up as he described his vision. She had always admired his dedication to creating spaces that brought people together. After dinner, Daniel suggested a walk along the river. The night was cool but pleasant, stars visible despite the city lights. They strolled side by side, their hands occasionally brushing against each other. "I keep expecting this to feel wrong," Emma admitted as they paused to look out over the water. "But it doesn't." Daniel turned to face her. "What does it feel like?" Emma thought for a moment. "Natural. As if we've been heading toward this moment for a long time. Is that strange?" "Not to me." Daniel moved closer. "May I kiss you? Properly this time?" Emma nodded, her heart racing as Daniel's hands gently cupped her face. His lips met hers, soft at first, then with growing intensity. Emma's arms wrapped around his neck as she melted into the kiss, all her doubts temporarily forgotten. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he whispered. "Me too," Emma admitted. They walked back to her apartment building hand in hand. At her door, Daniel kissed her again, slower this time, his hands tracing gentle patterns on her back. "Would you like to come in?" Emma asked quietly when they separated. Daniel stroked her cheek. "More than anything. But not tonight." At her confused look, he explained, "I want to do this right, Emma. I don't want you to have any regrets." Emma felt a rush of affection for him. "When can I see you again? Tomorrow? I could cook dinner at my place. I'd like that." One last kiss, and then Daniel was gone. Emma closed her door and leaned against it, her fingers touching her lips. She had expected to feel guilty or confused. Instead, all she felt was a growing certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next month passed in a blur of dinners, movies, and long walks through the city. Emma and Daniel fell into a comfortable rhythm, learning the small details about each other that only come with time and closeness. Every day, Emma's feelings for Daniel grew stronger, deeper than she had expected possible. Tonight, they were at Daniel's house, the home he shared with Sarah. Emma had been hesitant to come here at first, but Daniel insisted it was important. "This is part of who I am," he had explained. "My life with Sarah is not something I hide or set aside. The house felt different without Sarah's presence, yet Emma could feel her aunt's touch everywhere, in the artwork on the walls, the books on the shelves, even the plants in the windows. Strangely, being surrounded by these reminders of Sarah made Emma feel less guilty, not more. It was as if Sarah was giving her silent approval. Daniel was in the kitchen cooking dinner, the rich aroma of garlic and herbs filling the air. Emma wandered into his home office, curious about the space where he created his architectural designs. The room was neat but lived in, with blueprints carefully rolled on shelves and a large drafting table by the window. On Daniel's desk sat a framed photograph she had never seen before, Daniel and Sarah on their wedding day, young and radiant with happiness. Next to it was a more recent photo of the three of them at last Christmas, Emma sandwiched between the couple, all of them laughing at some forgotten joke. "Dinner's almost ready," Daniel said from the doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Emma turned, holding the Christmas photo. "I remember this. Uncle Tom had just told that terrible joke about the reindeer." Daniel smiled, walking over to look at the picture. "Sarah insisted on framing this one. She said it captured something special." He looked at Emma. She was right. He took the frame gently from her hands and set it down, then pulled her into his arms. "You okay being here?" he asked softly. Emma nodded against his chest. "It's nice actually. Feels right somehow." They ate dinner on the patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Daniel had made Sarah's favorite pasta dish, another small acknowledgement of her presence in their relationship. "I talked to Sarah this morning," Daniel said as they finished their wine. "She's having a wonderful time in Florence." Emma smiled. "She sent me some photos yesterday. She looks happy." "She asked about us," Daniel continued, his eyes on Emma's face. "Wanted to know how things were going." Emma felt a flutter of nervousness. "What did you tell her?" Daniel reached across the table for her hand. "I told her the truth, that these past weeks have been some of the happiest of my life." Emma squeezed his hand. "For me too." Later, they moved to the living room, music playing softly in the background. Daniel pulled Emma close for a slow dance, their bodies swaying gently to the melody. His arms around her waist felt like home, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered into her hair. Emma looked up at him. They had been taking things slow, limiting their physical relationship to passionate kisses and gentle touches, but the desire between them had been growing with each passing day. "Are you sure?" she asked. Daniel's answer was to lower his mouth to hers in a kiss that left no doubts about his feelings. Emma responded eagerly, her arms tightening around his neck as the kiss deepened. Daniel's hands slid down her back, pulling her closer until every inch of their bodies pressed together. Without breaking the kiss, Daniel lifted Emma into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist as he carried her up the stairs to the bedroom. Not the one he shared with Sarah, but the guest room he had been using since Emma and he began seeing each other. He laid her gently on the bed, his eyes dark with desire as he looked down at her. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, joining her on the bed. Their clothes fell away as their hands and lips explored each other. Every touch, every kiss felt like coming home after a long journey. When they finally joined together, Emma felt tears spring to her eyes at the intensity of their connection. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Emma's head on Daniel's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare back. She had never felt so content, so complete. "I love you, Emma," Daniel said quietly into the darkness. Emma raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. The words that had been growing in her heart for weeks now flowed easily from her lips. "I love you too." As Sarah's return from Europe grew closer, Emma found herself increasingly anxious. She and Daniel had fallen into a comfortable routine over the past 3 months, spending most nights together and many weekends at his cabin by the lake. Their relationship had deepened beyond what either of them had expected, moving far past physical attraction into something profound and meaningful. But what would happen when Sarah came home? Emma couldn't imagine going back to their old family relationship, pretending nothing had happened between her and Daniel. Yet she also couldn't imagine hurting her aunt, despite Sarah's apparent blessing. One evening, 2 weeks before Sarah's scheduled return, Emma and Daniel sat on the deck of his cabin, watching the sunset over the water. Emma had been quieter than usual all day, lost in her thoughts about the future. What's on your mind? Daniel asked, reaching for her hand. You've been somewhere else all day. Emma sighed. Sarah comes home soon. I'm just worried about what happens next. Daniel squeezed her hand. I've been wanting to talk to you about that. There's something I haven't told you. Emma felt a chill run through her. What is it? Daniel turned to face her fully. The reason Sarah suggested this arrangement, the reason she was so understanding about us, it wasn't just because she recognized our connection. Then why? Emma asked, her heart beating faster. Daniel took a deep breath. About a year ago, Sarah was diagnosed with a condition that affects her hormones. The treatments helped with most of her symptoms, but they also diminished her interest in physical intimacy. Emma stared at him, processing this new information. Why didn't you tell me this before? Sarah asked me not to at first. She didn't want your decision to be influenced by pity. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. But there's more to it than that. Before she left for Europe, the three of us discussed various possibilities, including, he hesitated. Including what? Emma prompted. Including the possibility of you becoming a permanent part of our relationship, if genuine feelings developed between us. Daniel's eyes held hers steadily, which they have, at least on my side. Emma sat back stunned. You mean? All three of us? Together? Daniel nodded. It's not a common arrangement, I know. But Sarah and I have always believed that love doesn't follow conventional rules. We've talked about polyamory before, but never found the right person who we both connected with. He paused. Until you. Emma stood up and walked to the railing, looking out at the darkening lake. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of this revelation. So all of this, us getting together while she was away, it was a test? To see if I would fit into your relationship. Daniel joined her at the railing. No, not a test, an exploration. Sarah genuinely wanted me to be happy while she was gone. But she also saw the potential for something more permanent. He gently turned Emma to face him. She cares for you deeply, Emma. As family, yes, but also as a woman she respects and admires. And what do you want, Daniel? His eyes softened. I love you, Emma. These past months have been incredible. The thought of going back to how things were before, he shook his head. I don't want to lose what we've found together. Emma leaned against him, her head on his chest. I love you too. But this is a lot to take in. I know, Daniel said, stroking her hair. And I'm not asking for an answer right now. Sarah will be home next week. The three of us should talk then, see how we all feel. That night, as they lay in bed together, Emma couldn't sleep. Her mind kept circling around the idea of a relationship that included both Daniel and Sarah. It was nothing she had ever considered before, nothing she'd been raised to expect or accept. Yet there was something about it that felt strangely right, as if the pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. Daniel's arm tightened around her waist as he slept. Emma turned to look at his face, peaceful in sleep. She loved him, of that she was certain. And she loved Sarah too, though in a different way. Could those two loves exist side by side, complementing rather than competing with each other? As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Emma made her decision. She would keep an open mind and an open heart when Sarah returned. The three of them would talk honestly about what they wanted and needed. And maybe, just maybe, they would find a way forward together that defied convention but honored the love they shared. Sarah's flight was scheduled to arrive at 2:30 p.m. Emma and Daniel waited at the airport, both nervous for different reasons. Emma kept smoothing her dress and checking her hair and her phone's camera. Daniel reached over and took her hand. Relax, he said softly. It's just Sarah. But it wasn't just Sarah anymore. Everything had changed in the past 3 months, and they all knew it. When Sarah walked through the arrival gate, Emma's heart skipped. Her aunt looked tanned and happy, her eyes bright as she scanned the waiting area. When she spotted them, her face broke into a wide smile. She rushed forward, dropping her carry-on bag to embrace Daniel tightly. Then, still holding Daniel with one arm, she reached out to Emma and pulled her into their hug. The three of them stood like that for a long moment, drawing curious glances from passing travelers. I missed you both so much, Sarah said, stepping back to look at them. Her eyes moved between their faces, searching. You look good together. The ride home was filled with Sarah's stories about Europe, the art she had seen, the food she had eaten, the people she had met. Emma sat in the back seat, watching Sarah's animated face as she talked, noting the occasional glances Sarah and Daniel exchanged, the easy way they touched each other's hands. There was no hint of jealousy or resentment in Sarah's behavior toward either of them. At the house, Daniel carried Sarah's bags upstairs, while Emma helped prepare a light dinner. They moved around the kitchen together, their old familiarity returning as if the months apart had never happened. "Thank you for taking care of him," Sarah said quietly as they chopped vegetables side by side. Emma blushed. "He took care of me too." Sarah smiled. "That's how it should be." She paused, knife in hand. "Are you happy, Emma? With him?" "Yes," Emma answered honestly, "more than I ever expected to be." Sarah nodded, satisfied. "Good, that's all I wanted." After dinner, they moved to the living room with glasses of wine. The conversation, which had flowed easily during the meal, suddenly faltered. The moment they had all been anticipating had arrived. "So," Sarah said, setting down her wine glass, "I think we should talk about what happens next." Daniel looked at Emma, then back at Sarah. "We should." Sarah took a deep breath. "I know you two have fallen in love. I can see it in the way you look at each other." She smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "It's beautiful to see." Emma felt tears threatening. "Sarah, I never meant for this to happen. I would never want to hurt you." "Oh, sweetheart." Sarah moved to sit beside Emma, taking her hands. "You haven't hurt me. Quite the opposite." Daniel leaned forward. "We've talked about this, Emma. About the possibility of a relationship that includes all three of us," Sarah finished for him. "I know it sounds unusual, maybe even wrong by conventional standards, but we've never been a conventional family, have we?" Emma looked from Sarah to Daniel and back again. "Are you sure this is what you want? Both of you?" Sarah squeezed her hands. "I love Daniel, I always will. But my condition has changed things between us. Seeing him happy with you, knowing that you care for him as deeply as I do, it doesn't diminish my love for him, it completes it." Daniel moved to kneel before them both. "And I love you both, in different but equally important ways." He took one of each of their hands. "I don't want to choose. I don't think I should have to." Emma felt a sense of peace settling over her. What would this look like? Practically speaking, they talked long into the night, discussing boundaries and expectations, fears and hopes. They laughed sometimes, cried sometimes, but always with an underlying current of love and respect that made every difficult topic easier to navigate. As dawn approached, the three of them stood in the garden, watching the sky lighten. Sarah stood between Emma and Daniel, her arms linked with theirs. "Are we really doing this?" Emma asked, still slightly disbelieving. "We are," Sarah said firmly. "A new kind of family. Our kind." Daniel leaned down to kiss Sarah softly, then turned to Emma and kissed her with equal tenderness. In that moment, as the first rays of sunlight touched their faces, Emma knew they were embarking on an unconventional journey together. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges and misunderstandings, judgments from others who couldn't understand. But standing there with the two people she loved most in the world, Emma felt nothing but joy and anticipation for the life they would build together. A life that had begun with a shocking request, but would continue with love, honesty, and the courage to follow their hearts.